Well, first, read from some writings that I did this past um, fall. I did. I practiced with some folks in Tassajara Mountain Monastery out in California, which I'm sure some of you have heard about. And I spent 3 months there um, playing Sado, or sort of guest special teacher. I don't know. They couldn't define it for me in their terms, so I'm not going to define it either. I did some writings and some thinking about some of my experiences over the years. And so this is something that I wrote there that I've been thinking about lately. It's not very long, and so discussion for it, or my thinking on it and discussion with you all about it, may be the main part of this talk. So just to start, this is a little vignette of an experience I had 13 years ago when I did my first Ango or practice period outside of Great Tree. Is very important to me. Well, the reason it came up is because at Tassajara, most of the cabins that the practitioners stay in, or the rooms that practitioners stay in, are right beside a big creek that makes a lot of noise. In fact, anywhere you are at Tassajara, you can hear the noise or the voice of this creek. And it made me think, and just listening to it at times, how sometimes it was soothing and, lovely to hear it. Well, at all times it was lovely to hear it. And at sometimes it's like, oh my God, it's so loud today, either because of rain or whatever. And it made me think, this is the voice of the water, the voice of the stones, the voice of that's produced by the constraining or the opening of the creek. And it made me think, why, it's so easy to hear that voice, but not so easy to hear the voices of other humans, of other creatures. Are we really listening? So this is what came out of that. And as I said, this is an experience at Ango all those years ago. I hope you can hear me. Is it okay? I'm okay? Okay, should have asked that before. A week of mornings serving as Jisha for Hojo-san. Hojo-san was a kindly, fatherly Japanese man who spoke little English. I've been told never to let anyone hear me say this, as it might be construed to a Japanese person as an insult. But Hojo-san struck me as a very common man, salt of the earth, feet on the ground, the kind of person, if he weren't a priest, might be a hardworking truck driver, a fisherman, a farmer, a teacher, a shopkeeper. Not because he didn't have the capacity to do anything he didn't want it to, but because doing good, practical, beneficial work doesn't always happen in priest robes. And I will argue with Dogen and die on that hill. To me, such a person is admirable, as admirable as any other ancestor. These are the sort of people I want to be, in robes or not. Those mornings, Hojo-san and I stood in an alcove near the kitchen, looking out over the temple's courtyard. He would point at a thermometer every day that was set on a table next to us. Invariably, it read 0 centigrade or below each of those days. He would always speak to me in Japanese, with an English word dropped in here and there, knowing full well I didn't understand a word. He'd point out towards the mountains, smile, hem and haw this morning monologue, and I would just listen, like listening to bird song or to the wind rustling, except arising from a human being. One morning, he pointed at the thermometer, and I began speaking. Perhaps this might be considered rude. He is Hojo-san, after all, the head of the monastery, the head of the Ango, or the practice period. If it was rude, he gave no indication that he was affronted. He nodded. He watched me. He listened. Maybe he understood a bit of what I said, but probably not much. Still, I felt heard, if not completely understood. Finally, the signal we were waiting for from across the courtyard sounded, and as usual, we bowed and began our jundo through the kitchen, the kuin, kaisando, hato, the soto, 3 short, 3 long, incense sticks. To listen without barrier of language or judgment. We could have said anything. We might agree or disagree. For a moment, it was like listening to the creek rolling by. What is there to misunderstand? We are here. We all feel the cold. We're all listening for our cues. We're all listening for the hints as to how to live this life. And my question in that, again, is what is there to misunderstand? Why can't I listen to you? Why can't I hear you sometimes? Why are we so good at listening to, or what we call listening to, the natural sounds of the world? And yet my voice is just as natural, just as clear as the creek if I listen to it clean. And by clean, I mean without my ideas, my thoughts, my preferences blocking the way. Likes and dislikes arise. They don't fall away so easily. The idea of me, my ideas, my thoughts, my feelings don't easily fall away when I come to meet or try to meet another being. There's another experience from my time in Japan when words failed me simply because I don't speak the language. I might have told this story before. I tell it all the time because to me right now, it's so funny. At the time, it was devastating, but these days, it's hilarious. I was in the Nisoto, and one of my tasks was to clean the floor in this little foyer outside of the kitchen. When I was first given the task, I was given a bucket and a cloth. And I was told to sweep the floor and then wipe the floor all the way out the door and into the onto the stairs that led down to the outside. And I did that the first couple of days. And then this person came to me, another person who spoke a bit of English. She was from another country. And she came out and she looked at me and she said, "Why are you doing it like that?" You know, she said in a way where her voice to me in my head sounded like, "Oh, you're stupid. Why are you doing that? That's not how you're supposed to do it." And she then told me, "There's a mop around the corner, and there's you could use the mop around the corner. Just put it back where it's supposed to be. There's a mop and a broom around the corner. You can use that. And you don't have to get on your hands and knees." Okay. Something told me that, that wasn't the thing to do, because otherwise they'd have told me that from the first place. And the way she said it was like, "Make sure you put it back, put it back where it's supposed to go. Like, you're not really supposed to use that." And something in my head said that. But something in my head first heard stupid. An idea, that maybe I was being punked or something. Or maybe, I didn't understand. And it's like, they gave me this rag and they made me look silly and out on my hands and knees. So I started using the mop and bucket. Now, if you have a mop and bucket, you got to be able to wring it out. You got to get the mop. You got to clean the mop. You got to go all the way around the corner to get it. Takes a lot more time than just using the rag and bucket that's sitting right there. I kind of knew that. And so for a couple of days, I did what this other person told me to do, and, spent a lot more time cleaning them up, all that, whatever. A couple of days after that, the American girl who wasn't there, all the time, she was there a few times, she came and went. She came out and she said, "You're not supposed to use that. That belongs to another team, Rio, or another group. And you're not supposed to use that on the floor outside or in the floor over here. It's supposed to be used over there. It belongs to this team." And then she, and I started arguing with her. And the only reason I was arguing with her, I wouldn't have done it with the Japanese girls, the Japanese women. If they had said, "No, don't do that," I would have just gone ahead and put it back. What can I say? They wouldn't have understood me. But I could argue with this woman. I can make her hear me and hear my ideas and hear that, I'm right. You're wrong and I'm right. But after a while, she stood there, she stood her ground, she said, "Put this back." And so I put it back. And I got the, rag and the bucket. I was finished in 5 minutes. What a jerk. Why did I argue with this woman? Why didn't I just hear what my team said? And I didn't have to go with, and I went back and forth, but why? Why in my brain I could understand, and from then out, I used my rag and my bucket and I was finished and I was back with my team on time, getting things done, getting the rest of the day done. If I had to listen to what was real and not what I'd made up, right and wrong, I'm right. If I'd really heard, even what was going on in my own mind, I wouldn't have wasted so much time. And kind of that's what it's about. The gentleman I was talking about in the beginning in my little writing vignette there, I'm told he's pretty conservative. He's pretty, straight up, Japanese man, very conservative. Though I don't believe that he's ultra so, because he's also the same teacher or the same, I don't know what his title was back then. When my teacher went in the early '80s to Japan to do her ongos, she wasn't going to get any kind of credit in terms of getting qualified or anything, because at that time women weren't supposed to go to these to a monastery that was basically male or that had co-ed sort of thing. The men went and they were given straight up training to do this, but the women could only watch. They couldn't deal with the actual ceremonies and things. They could watch, take notes, whatever. And that was their training as opposed to the male training. And so my teacher spent 2 years there and wasn't going to get any kind of certification or anything. She couldn't get it at that time at the monastery she was at. It's changed. And part of the reason it changed was because of Hojo-san. She knew him, when I went. So that's how she knows him, because he fought for those women. So I don't really know what he thinks. I can't have a conversation with him to discuss anything or that kind of conversation. But standing in that space for those few moments, and I guess you all just, it only takes a few minutes. We were standing in that alcove, and just to describe what that looks like. Every morning, he's the one that leads the ceremony in the same way that Tenku, he leads the ceremony for you. And there are a whole bunch of people that help him do this ceremony. And that morning, I was the Jisha, carrying the incense, lighting the incense, accompanying him to these different places, to the kitchen, to the dining room, to the hato, the ceremony hall, ringing the bells in these different places as he did his ceremony in those places until we got to the Soto, where the morning ceremony prior to what do you call it, to the morning sitting happened. It always happened early in the morning. Sometimes it was 4:00 in the morning, to accompany him to that, carrying the incense, lighting it, handing it to him, so on. And it's a very quiet sort of time, but he chose to speak. And then I chose to speak. And it didn't feel dangerous. It just felt like voices, the voices of the trees rustling in the wind, the voice of the wind, carrying through the courtyard and those spaces. And over the mountains, because we were up in the mountains. And I don't know the man, honestly, but I feel like I do. And it's almost, the thing is that regardless of what we've made up in our brains, I'm not saying, and I'm not using the thing true or false. Either way, it's what we've shaped in our heads. Regardless of how strongly we feel about it or not, underlying that is the true connection that we ignore when we have these clashes You know, I'm very aware, we're very aware, I guess, these days of who's who and who does this and who believes this and who believes that. But what's really underneath all that? That's the world we make. What's really underneath the world we make? But the Dharma, which is what we try to touch every time we sit. And that's why it's so important to sit with each other in the presence of each other so that we can hear each other breathe, hear that natural sound, hear that music, hear that song of living that we share, that is truly shared with each other, rather than the noise we make, trying to be me, trying to be I, which we say we are trying to drop and leave behind so that we can touch the true Dharma or enlightenment or whatever we want to call it. So we can truly know that Bodhi state, to know what it is to, if not be, but at least approach our Buddha, our Buddha selves. If we really, really are serious about that, we have to be in the presence of each other, always. Well, as much as we can, because that's not possible. COVID comes and goes, or something like COVID comes and goes. But we need to do that as much as we can. And no shade to those who are homebound and can't always, approach that. But just whether you can or can't, be aware. We all feel the cold. We all feel the call to Dharma, whether we call it that or not. Doesn't matter what you call it. So that's kind of what I was trying to express in that little writing that I did that may not have hit that point. And what I think about, right now. It's hard to do that because, all our lives feel a little shaky at times. It's hard to find that true connection sometimes when we're bound up in being us and all the issues that come up and the pain and the fear that comes up. You don't get beyond that without each other. That's why some of us wear these robes, so that we can bring that together. Bring us all together. That's kind of our quote unquote job as people who wear robes. So I think that's all I really have to say about that. Still working on it. In myself and so on. But yeah. And also to remember that in a sense, whether we wear robes or not, when you wear robes, it's I don't want to say duty because that sounds funny to me. Don't know why yet, but that word doesn't quite fit. It's our aspiration, and I'm not sure that fits it, but to wear robes is to aspire to do that bodhisattva work and bring and first to wrong word. Wait, hold on a minute. First to serve as a model of that, but also to facilitate the coming together and the connection between people. But in making those connections, it also becomes the aspiration of those who don't wear robes. It becomes the aspiration to do this at work and really hear your coworker. Whether you agree or not, the agreement or disagreement is not the point. I know you got to do work, but the agreement or disagreement is not the point. But to truly hear each other. When you're teaching a child, that child may get it right then. That child may not get it, with you. Doesn't mean they won't get it with somebody else who speaks their language, but to give up, it's not an option. Even in politics, as crazy as it is right now, if we truly care, those connections have to be, whether you agree with this one or that one, those connections have to be nurtured, as hard as it is. So that's kind of what I'm saying. To listen to each other in the way that it seems, seems easier to listen to the creek. But to really, in the same way, to hear them, hard work. That practice is not easy, and there are no remedial classes. Sorry to tell you. Okay. You just have to do it as best you can.